coming up on FaceTime.
Oh yeah, it's been probably 5 years since I've been to the Guangzhou area. That's the only time in my whole life I've ever seen anybody do that. That's really, you know, the Chinese say 左右开弓. The Chinese covers such a huge area, such a huge portion of humanity. There's no such thing as a difficult language. I'm convinced of this.
Really?
I'm equally convinced that 活到老学到老，还有3分学不到。
A foreigner performing China's Tianjin Kuaiban and rapping in Chinese. This is Mr. Jian was, also affectionately known by his Chinese name, Professor Wang Jian, an internationally renowned Canadian sinologist who is fascinated with Chinese culture.
I tested all in the movie industry and also peacefully.
Professor Wang Jian was first introduced to Chinese language and literature during his sophomore year of college, and eventually graduated with a PhD in this major. The following 30 years saw Professor Wang Jian teach Chinese language and Chinese culture studies in various colleges throughout Canada. You would think that could keep Professor Wang Jian pretty busy, but he also made time to found the Asia-Canada program, and did we forget mention that he also worked as a cultural attaché at the Canadian Embassy in Beijing, China from 1981 to 1983. Retirement did not see Professor Wang Jian slow down at all. In fact, he now keeps himself busy with consultancy work for many Chinese culture-based events. His most recent trip to Guangdong saw him travel here as the culture consultant for the 2014 Golden Panda North American Short Film Festival. And speaking of Guangdong, Professor Wang Jian is definitely no stranger to this part of China. Do you have any expectations for this trip since now?
I've been looking forward to this trip ever since I was invited to take part in it, because in every time that I've had a chance to come to Guangzhou before, or to Guangdong province even before, it's always been business related, university business related, or to attend a conference, or to give a lecture at Zhongshan University or something. And it's always quick in, quick out, and focusing on everything except
in a rushed way.
Yeah, but focusing on everything except looking at my host environment here. So this is a real great opportunity for me, and I've really enjoyed it. In fact, I had been, the only place we're going now that I had been to before is Foshan, the ancestral temple there, the Zu Miao. I actually went there in the early 1980s, and I remembered, I'll never forget it in my life, because as soon as I went in the entrance, there was a Chinese gentleman at one side with a table. He unfolded the legs and put a table there, and he had the Wenfang Sibao, all of the brush pens and the ink and the ink stone and everything there. And I was asking him, what do you do here? And he said, oh, you tell me your name, and I will create a parallel, an antithetically parallel couplet using your, the characters in your name. Yeah. And I said, oh, that sounds like fun. So I asked him to do that, and he asked me, what's your name? I said, Wang Jian. Okay, and he came up immediately with grammatically parallel, but semantically antithetical.
Were you impressed?
Yeah, but this is not what impressed me. What really impressed me was he took up 2 brush pens, one in the left hand, one in the right hand, and he started just out straight from his mouth up to the tip of his tongue, he wrote the parallel couplets. Not one word with the right hand, one word with the left hand. Writing with both hands at the same time. That's the only time in my whole life I've ever seen anybody do that. That's really, you say, in Chinese you say, 左右开弓. He's really using both sides of his brain at the same time.
That's a perfect metaphor for that action.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
what did it occur to you to say, maybe I must learn from it?
Yeah. At that time I had already been a professor teaching Chinese in universities in Canada for probably 12 years or so. But, it's just another example of the Chinese saying,活到老学到老还有3分学不到. You live until you're old, you learn until you're old, but there's still that 30% that you'll never be able to.
And you never stop learning from Chinese.
No, you never stop learning.
Do you have any new findings this time?
New findings this time?
To the previous experience?
Of course. Oh, yeah. It's been probably 5 years since I've been to the Guangzhou area. And, it's transportation the transportation situation has improved so dramatically. Whether you're talking about driving, getting from one part of this huge sprawling city to another, there are, like high-speed highway connections between them, which they didn't used to have several years ago. Second, you want to get from here to, let's say, to Shenzhen. It's just like a half an hour. You're going 300 kilometers an hour on the new high-speed train. That was an amazing experience. They didn't have that the last time I was here. The signs of economic development are all over the place. The giant sky-high buildings, and those are already built, and then like every 3 or 4 you'll find another crane way up in the sky. There's going to be another huge high-rise building here. Signs of modernization everywhere. It's quite impressive.
Well, in addition to that, what about the culturally, which impressed you at this time?
Culturally, let's see. We went to the theme park, the China nationality folklore theme park here in Guangzhou. I've never seen, this is bigger than the biggest Disneyland I think I've ever seen around. It's a huge, it must be hundreds of acres in size. I'm told that it would take probably 2 whole days, to walk through the whole thing. We went just through several nationalities, and then we heard, when we just walked in, I heard some sounds. It sounded like there might be something to do with the Mongolian nationality here. We winded up some stairs, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of a huge stadium. There are thousands of people in the stadium, and this huge open area ground there, and people were racing horses and doing horseback battle and everything, like, between the Mongols and the Han or whatever, that sort of thing. Historical. It's the reenactment of historical events in Chinese history. So it's great to see aspects of Chinese history brought to life right before your eyes. But again,
perspective, like the booming perspective culturally.
Yes. Anyway, it's great to see that interest is still there, that the interest in the tradition, also interest in the diversity of Chineseness, because whenever I say Chinese, I almost want to put quotation marks around it, because Chinese covers such a huge area, such a huge portion of humanity. But it's nice to see it all represented here.
Being a Canadian with profound knowledge of Chinese culture, Professor Wang Jian sees himself as a bridge and has devoted his life to raising interest in China's language, literature, art, and opera in the West. He has most certainly contributed a lot to promoting Chinese culture abroad, for which he has gained a lot of respect. Besides all of this, as an internationally renowned sinologist, Professor Wang Jian doesn't hold back in letting people know of his passion for Chinese language, in particular Chinese poetry and proverbs. of which he refers to as the essence and charm of traditional Chinese culture, as well as a collection of thousands of years of Chinese history and wisdom. For more than 40 years, Professor Wang Jian has accumulated vast knowledge of Chinese proverbs, ranging from agricultural proverbs right through to meteorological proverbs. What is even more impressive is that he has single-handedly translated around 400 Chinese classical poems into English.
How do you put words into a beauty of language? How do you value the inner beauty of different languages?
For me, the key to real viscerally satisfying translation is not to become imprisoned by the boundaries of definitions that you'll find in a dictionary.
No.
But you have to know that. You have to know what the dictionary definition of the words you're translating is going to be, but you can't be imprisoned by that, because the denotative meaning of a word is only a part of its whole meaning, especially if there are profound feelings that you want to convey from one language to another. It's one thing to convey the words, but it's something else entirely to convey profound feeling. So the translation must focus on translating the profound feeling, and then try to come as close as you can to the original words, but don't be imprisoned by them, because the profound message, or the profound sense, the profound feeling is more important. And especially, you know, in my own favorite areas of translation, which is poetry. You know, back in the 1950s, 1940s or 50s maybe, one of my favorite 20th century poets, an American poet named Robert Frost, was once asked, how can you define poetry? You know, can you give us a good definition of poetry? And he said, oh, sure, that's easy. Poetry is that which does not come through in translation. And you might think that, you know, that would just like pour cold water on a potential translator, but it's not. It's a reminder that...
Do you agree with him?
I agree with him in the sense it doesn't have to be. It most often is, but it doesn't have to be. Okay? And it's because most translators are translating words, phrases, and sentences, or metrics and rhymes and that sort of thing, and you translate everything that way except the profound feeling. Especially with when you're translating Chinese poetry, Chinese poetry was almost always occasional. Didn't have any what we would call professional Chinese poets in the old days. People who made their living composing poetry. Didn't have any of that. What we had was people who, as a part of their education, learned poetry, and they learned the greatest poet. They learned from the greatest poets, and they practiced writing poetry, and they used poetry as a tool to commemorate a significant event in unforgettable language. Okay, so what you want to translate is not the words. You want to translate what made that an unforgettable commemoration. The only reason they wrote down the words of the poems is as a memorandum, so they wouldn't forget it. Chinese never wrote poetry. They didn't write poetry. You never say 写诗. They never write. 作诗. They made poetry.
Create poetry.
They create poetry or make poetry, and they write it down as a memo, so they're not going to forget it. But poems are made to be not to be declared on stage in front of a big audience or anything like they are now. They were made to be chanted, again in a very almost mystic, profound way, in celebration of a very significant event using unforgettable language. That, to me, that's what poetry is.
Well, sir, so far, do you see your immersion into Chinese language and literature as a gift? Or do you see that you don't believe that everyone can take a position of learning Chinese language because it's too hard?
There's no such thing as a difficult language. I'm convinced of this. I'm equally convinced that the only difference is you have really good teachers, you have mediocre teachers, and you have lousy teachers. If the teacher is good, then they will find a way to bring you into the ambiance of a social situation in which you will learn how a Chinese thinks about who is expected to say what to whom, in what tone of voice, with what degree of respect, how casually, and so forth. Yes, you learn how to project yourself into the situation as a Chinese person. So it's really, in a way, it starts out rather like acting. Like you look at the script, you try to internalize the script, then you picture yourself as being seen by Chinese people in this situation, and you're imitating the way a Chinese speaker acts. But it's not just the sounds that they emit. It's the look in their eyes. It's the expression on their face. It's the distance that they keep between themselves. Is it the same as we would keep if we were speaking English? And will they use their hands? Do they gesticulate like Italians do, or do they keep their hands still like a cultivated British person would? You keep all these things in mind, and act like they do. And a speech act is just a part of the whole act that a person gets into. Now, a good teacher, first of all, a good teacher will tell their students, if they're teaching Chinese, I can statistically prove to you that Chinese cannot possibly be difficult to speak and to listen to. Mandarin we're talking about, in Chinese Mandarin, okay? There are only 400 and some odd syllables that you have to master in Mandarin. Now, each one of those, you can't express everything in the universe in 400 syllables, so you want to get more mileage out of each syllable, so you give it 4 tones. So ma, 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 right? And I start out, let's start out with mama, mama. Okay, mama, mama, 大家跟我说, everyone repeat after me, mama, mama. Okay? And then there's very little grammar in Chinese. You don't have to worry about ifs and thens or subjunctives or things. So if I wanted to say, if mama curses the horse is going to curse mama. Or just say, mama, 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 right? And to get, something like that is, it's easy to remember. So all the time that you save in learning the pronunciation of only 400 syllables and the grammar, which is incredibly simple, all the time you save, you use that time on the Chinese characters, because they're more complicated than 26 ABC, alphabets, right? So it balances out. It's not difficult. It's just the way you approach it, the way you parcel your time, and the way the teacher, because students progress this way. This is how I see you seeing me. If I look into your eyes, you're my teacher, I look into your eyes, and if I see in your eyes that you'd become suicidally despondent if I couldn't master this, then I'm not going to disappoint you. And I don't want to disappoint you because you think I can do it. And I know you do because I can see it in your eyes. But I know lots of foreign language teachers, not just Chinese, other Asian languages too. When a student looks into their eyes, the student feels, I don't know why I'm doing this. I get paid to do it, so I'm doing it, but you'll probably never master it, but I get paid for doing this, so I'm going to spend time with you. That has a huge impact on students. So I always made sure that my students felt like I would become suicidally despondent if they didn't. I was born and raised in South Carolina. I learned how to talk English like this. This is the way I first learned how to talk. Yeah. And then I learned how to speak English properly, and then I learned how to speak Chinese. So if this if this hillbilly can learn Chinese, I'm sure I can.
That would be a big relief for the rookies in this area if they're trying to learn, pick up a new, not native language besides Chinese.
But it's all about pedagogy. It's all about the strategies that you use to teach a student. Chinese is not difficult.